I shouldn't have been born. Rejected by my parents and ultimately abandoned. My aunt and uncle said they wanted to be my family, but I was sure they would abandon me too. That's what I thought. It's been 10 years since that unbearably painful day. Unbelievably happy days awaited me. My name is Mary. I was a beginner at dancing, but I joined a dance fitness class for mothers, and now, at 40, I'm living days that feel like high school club activities. No matter how old you get, life can be enjoyable. I now live every day vibrantly, but as a child, I was weak and far from any notion of youth. It all started when I was 10 years old. I had a high fever for several days, and despite going to the hospital, the cause remained unknown. I was shuffled from one hospital to another until I finally ended up at a hospital where I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus, a rare disease. Even a minor trigger would cause a fever, and the side effects of the prescribed steroids made my face round, while the disease symptoms caused hair loss. Even when my condition stabilized, any carelessness would put me back in bed, leaving me constantly fatigued. So, unlike normal kids, I couldn't stay up late or play until I was exhausted. Eventually, my mother said, "Mary, you get fevers too easily, so playing with friends is off limits." I stopped going out, and my body gradually gained weight. Friends probably didn't enjoy hanging out with someone like me. The number of people who wanted to play with me decreased. Even my parents, while drinking at night. She gets fevers all the time, and although the medical costs are subsidized, the taxi fares for taking her to the hospital are quite expensive. Why did we have to have such a child? Complained about me. I didn't choose to have this disease. Not understanding my feelings of living with an incurable illness, they said whatever they pleased, and I harbored resentment toward my parents. But at the same time, I longed for their love like before the illness, making my feelings very complicated. Through it all, my older sister, Rolla, 2 years my senior, always stayed by my side. Rolla, at 12, already had a refined face, the so-called beauty. When we went to the shopping street together, "You're so cute, here's a freebie," people would say, often giving us 4 or 5 more freebies than we ordered. With her round, cute eyes and straight hair. It was as if she had inherited her looks from our quarter-blood grandmother, with her small face and long limbs resembling a model's. Our parents doted on the undeniably beautiful Rolla. Whenever we went out, my mother always held Rolla's hand, and it was common for my parents to go out with Rolla alone. I don't remember ever having my hand held, and being left behind was a frequent occurrence. I think they loved me more equally before I got sick. But after I fell ill. If I walk with you, Mary, who has a round face from the steroids, people will think I'm a parent who can't manage their child's weight. My mother refused to go out with me. Even my father said, "Because Mary and Rolla don't look alike, the neighbors are gossiping that I had an affair. Let's stop going out as a family." So, I was the only one left out. Their behavior of doting solely on Rolla while treating me as an unwanted object escalated daily. "You're not going out anyway, so it's fine." They stopped giving me an allowance and rarely bought me clothes. Even on my birthday. "We don't think it's something to celebrate that Mary was born, so no party." Leave it alone. Rolla would be taken to a restaurant or get new shoes just for scoring well on a test. But despite all that, Rolla grew up to be a kind and humble person. She would subtly find out what I wanted, tell our parents she wanted it for herself, and then give it to me as a present. Whenever she went out with our parents, "I want Mary to come along too," she always said. Our parents would. "It's because she's weak and might get sick if we take her out." Convince her. Rolla would. "Why are Mom and Dad so cold to Mary? We're both their children." often complained to me. She couldn't understand why I wasn't loved the same way. Everyone around us praised Rolla for her beauty, but she didn't seem to realize it herself. She didn't think it was a reason to compare herself to me. It's not looks that matter. What's important is a person's heart. Rolla would say things like that, wise beyond her years. Even though I'm her sister, I have to say she didn't seem like our parents' child at all. When I entered middle school, my condition worsened due to hormonal changes, and I gained more weight during puberty. Even though I tried to control my diet, I kept gaining weight. Looking back, it was probably swelling from the medication. My parents, being adults, should have noticed that, but they didn't. Instead, they would berate me. "Don't walk next to us." Or, "It's embarrassing just having you come in and out of the house. Why can't you manage yourself better?" Saying. They never showed any concern or support. Rolla used to go to school with me, worried about my illness, but even that was forbidden by our parents. "Having you walk next to you lowers Rolla's reputation," they said. Rolla protested vehemently, saying it was absurd, but at that time, our household was a bit dysfunctional, and our parents' words were absolute. No matter how old we were or how reasonable our arguments, we had no choice but to comply with their harsh commands. At that time, it wasn't just that they favored Rolla, but they were simply annoyed by my presence. They wanted to stop any interaction between me and Rolla. It's almost laughable how little they treated me as part of the family. Eventually, they even scolded Rolla for talking to me, making me feel guilty for talking to her, so I started to avoid conversations with her. Rolla would tell me not to worry, but back then, "Okay, I won't worry." I didn't have the strength to just say. Gradually, a rift grew between us. Exactly as our parents wanted. We barely spoke, even though we lived in the same house, like strangers. Our parents spoke to me only when necessary and even ordered me to eat my meals alone in my room. They seemed determined to exclude me from the family. One day, I came home from school to find the house empty. There was a note on the table saying they had gone on a family trip. I knew it, but it still hurt. I wasn't considered part of the family. They had left me behind in the freezer, as if saying, "Eat this." There was a lot of frozen pizza inside. After being treated so poorly for so long, I felt pathetic for being grateful they at least left food for me, even if it was just pizza. They didn't come back for about a week, and of course, the pizza ran out. Without any allowance, I survived the last few days on school lunches alone. It became normal to be treated so poorly, and years passed. One day when I was 15, I was suddenly woken up in the middle of the night by my parents, who yelled at me to get in the car. Confused and still in my pajamas, I got in the car, and they drove to my maternal uncle's house. "Why are we going to Uncle's house at this hour?" I tried to make sense of it with my groggy mind, but couldn't find an answer. My parents rang the doorbell several times until my uncle and aunt, looking very displeased, appeared at the door. "What's going on, sis? At this hour?" My uncle rubbed his temples, clearly irritated from being woken up. My aunt, not wanting to be seen in her pajamas, tried to cover herself with a robe and fix her messy hair. "I have a favor to ask you too. I just had the most brilliant idea." My mother laughed loudly, finding something amusing. My uncle and aunt looked very annoyed by her behavior. "I want you to be with Mary. I mean, please take her." My mother pushed me forward in front of my uncle and aunt. My father. "From now on, uncle and aunt will be your new family, Mary," added. I didn't understand. My mother was genuinely excited to get rid of me, and my father, who only showed kindness in this moment, looked like a demon to me. Naturally, my uncle and aunt were stunned. My cousin Nancy, who seemed to have heard the commotion, came down from her room in her pajamas. "Mary sleeps all the time and looks terrible. She's become a disgrace to us. She'll be a high schooler next year. It'll cost even more money, and we don't want to invest in a child with no future." My father nodded in agreement with my mother's words. "We've done a good job raising her so far. We're tired, so think of it as doing us a favor and take her. It's okay, right?" My mother laughed. Did she not realize how terrible her words were? Or did she think it didn't matter because it was me? No longer able to feel sad about it. I was numb. But I wondered why I was born into such a family. Should I even be alive? Feeling completely rejected, I muttered, "I shouldn't have been born." At that moment, "That's not true!" my aunt shouted. She covered her mouth, surprised by her own outburst. But my uncle, "That's right. There's no such thing as not being allowed to be born," continued. Nancy came over and held my hand. "Auntie says it's okay. Mary, come to our place. Let's be a family." I didn't know how to respond. Even though I knew my parents didn't love me, they were still my only parents. Some part of me wanted to stay with them. But looking at their faces, they just smiled happily. Great. Hoping they'd ask me to come back. Not being loved by my parents, going to live with my uncle and aunt, I was sure I'd just be a burden to them. Even though their words were kind, I knew they must really find me troublesome. As the arrangements were made for me to move, "I'm just changing the place where I'll suffer," I thought to myself. I don't care anymore. 10 years passed after that. Living with my uncle and aunt, I tried to be a good girl every day, always worried about when they might start hating me. Even after 10 years, I was never disliked by my uncle and his wife, nor was I treated as an outsider in the family. I remember the time during my entrance exams. "I don't want to be a burden, so I'm going to work and leave this house." When I said this, my uncle, tears streaming down his face. "The last thing a child should ever do is feel like they need to take care of adults," angrily responded. From the moment I was taken in, I had always kept a wall up with my aunt and uncle. I always thought they would abandon me eventually. But it turns out that my uncle was struggling, not knowing how to get me to open up to him. My aunt was crying too, and I felt ashamed for ignoring their kindness all this time. I realized I could trust these people. Understanding each other's true feelings, I finally became their child. I called them Dad and Mom, and although Nancy was my age, she felt more like a close friend and cousin than a sister. My aunt and uncle's household wasn't as financially well off as my parents, who were bankers, but they celebrated my birthday with my aunt's homemade dishes and gave me the same allowance as Nancy. We didn't go on many family trips, but we always went grocery shopping together on weekends. Once a month, we'd have a pizza party, which was incredibly fun. The 10 years that flew by were much more brilliant than the 14 years I spent with my parents. And at the 10-year mark, I took a significant step. I reached out to Rolla, whom I had been estranged from for 10 years. It seemed that Rolla had never been told where I was. Knowing my parents wanted to keep us apart, this didn't surprise me. The reason for the sudden disappearance was also, they reported to the police that she ran away from home, which was a lie. Originally, my parents were somewhat estranged from my uncle and his wife. This was because my uncle disliked my mother for being selfish and self-centered since childhood. My mother didn't like my uncle very much either. When I think about it, the last time my sister, Nancy, and I saw them was when we were about 5 years old. Due to such relationships among the adults, Rolla never imagined I would be at my uncle's house. When I saw Rolla after a long time, she looked completely worn out, losing the glow she had when she was called beautiful. However, the kindness in her embrace when she hugged me, saying she missed me, hadn't changed. I had always been concerned about Rolla too, so tears naturally welled up in my eyes. Rolla said that after she was separated from me, her parents' interference in her life became severe. By chance, she was scouted on the street and was reluctantly made to do some entertainment work due to her parents' wishes. But it was just a small magazine snap model job. It wasn't a long-lasting job, and no matter how cute Rolla was, there were always better ones. It wasn't a world where you could survive just by being cute, and there was no demand for Rolla in the modeling world. Even so, her parents didn't allow Rolla to go to college and insisted she devote herself to entertainment activities. "Rolla, you'll definitely be fine. You can become famous," they said. Since they saw Rolla's fame as their own, they didn't want to miss the chance for her to become a celebrity. But in reality, she didn't gain any popularity, and there were times when she had no work at all for a year. In this situation, she was unemployed. She thought about saving money and going to college, but her parents strongly opposed it. There were times when they locked her up at home, saying she couldn't leave until she reflected on her actions. The escalating interference from her parents seemed to have caused Rolla to become mentally ill. She didn't seem to realize it herself, but gradually, she couldn't make the right decisions, accepting the situation as inevitable. Now, she was completely under her parents' control, taking care of her mother, who had been dragging her leg after breaking her knee a few years ago. "That's not right. Why should you live your life according to Dad and Mom's wishes?" I angrily spoke, and Rolla listened silently with her eyes downcast. She probably realized deep down that her life was not normal. Just a little more. "Rolla, you say you can't start over in your late 20s, but it's never too late. Let's do it together. Are you going to dedicate your whole life to them?" Holding Rolla's hand, I desperately pleaded. After talking for about 2 hours, Rolla finally said, "You're right, Mary. How did it end up like this?" And cried. "It's okay. You can definitely start over. I'll help you," I said, hugging Rolla. I comforted Rolla, who suddenly started to sob, and we parted ways that day. A month later, I visited our nostalgic family home. When I rang the doorbell, my mother looked at me with a face as if seeing something dirty. "What are you doing here?" she shouted. "I'm here to pick up Rolla." "What? What are you talking about? Go back. We've reported you as a runaway." "I know," Rolla told me. "What?" Not knowing about my reunion with Rolla, my mother looked at me as if I was a crazy woman. From behind her, Rolla appeared. "Sorry to keep you waiting," with a suitcase in hand. "Rolla? Where are you going with that luggage?" my mother asked in surprise. "I'm going to live with Mary." "What?" My mother looked quite surprised, and I almost laughed. "Mom, your knees aren't really that bad, are they? The other day, you walked perfectly fine to get ice cream from the fridge." Rolla's words made Mom turn pale and freeze in shock. Did she think Rolla wouldn't fight back? Or did she not realize that her knee issue wasn't as severe as she claimed? It could be both. Rolla used to argue with her parents a lot as a kid, but that had faded over the years. Dad appeared from behind. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, but I can't keep living under your control anymore. I want to live my own life. From today, I'm cutting ties with both of you." "What?" Dad was now the one stunned by Rolla's words. "I've always been good to you, so why?" Blustered. "You may think you've been good, but from my perspective, your actions have been overbearing." My comment clearly irritated Dad, and he glared at me. "Just because you weren't treated with love doesn't mean we were overbearing. We treated her normally as parents." "Then why didn't you let her go to college? Why did you deny her opinions and twist her life? She's 27, not a child anymore. You're too controlling." Rolla, in a small but steady voice, said it had been hard for her. Dad started to argue with me, but then fell silent when he heard Rolla's words. "You can't argue, can you? You've always treated her for your own convenience. It's only natural for a child to abandon such parents." "We haven't." "Yes, Rolla accepted our wishes too. Don't act like we're the only ones at fault." Both of them claimed they weren't to blame, but they were clearly at fault. "Keep thinking you're innocent for the rest of your lives. No matter what you say, I'm taking Rolla with me." "No! Don't take our precious Rolla away. Mary, you're the worst daughter," Mom screamed, and I glared at her. "If you really cared, you should have done better. If I'm the worst daughter, you're the worst parents for not understanding your child's feelings." Mom and Dad, thinking they were innocent, didn't listen to my words. They said things like, "We've taken good care of you too, Mary." Of course, I ignored them. "Let's go, Rolla." I took Rolla's hand. Uncle, Aunt, and Nancy, who had been waiting in the car nearby, came to meet us. Mom glared at Uncle. "Why are you here?" And said, "It's not like we're taking them in since they're adults. But it's hard to watch sisters being apart. We'll consider Rolla as our child from now on." "What?" "We'll treat Rolla and Mary as part of our family. Susan, you and your husband will have to handle things on your own from now on." Aunt's words left Mom and Dad even more speechless. "You look confused. It means that all of us here are cutting ties with you. No matter what difficulties you face in old age, don't rely on us." When I explained, my parents were stunned into silence. "Well, bye." Rolla got into Uncle's car without looking back. I smiled and said, "Take care." We all left, with Uncle and Aunt waving slightly, and Nancy telling them to reflect on their actions. My parents just stared in shock as we got into the car, unable to say anything, and that was the end of that day for them. A few days later, they started showing up at my uncle's house repeatedly. "We'll apologize to both of you, just give us Rolla back," pleading. But it was already too late. By then, Rolla and I had already moved out of my uncle's house and were living together on our own. Originally, I had been living with my uncle, but I rented a new place to get Rolla away from our parents. This was also my uncle's suggestion, as he believed it would be better for Rolla's mental health for the sisters to live alone. I agreed that it was for the best. At first, my uncle ignored my persistent parents when they visited, but eventually, he got angry. "You say you'll apologize, but all you want is Rolla back. It's because of parents like you that you've been abandoned by your own children. If your children have abandoned you, it's your own fault." He scolded them and drove them away. My parents finally understood the gravity of what they had done and broke down in tears, but hearing about it didn't move Rolla and me at all. They cried? So what? That was how I felt. Because Rolla and I had suffered much more. I even thought they deserved to suffer more. After that, my parents started blaming each other, saying, "It's your fault the kids have drifted apart." And their relationship deteriorated, eventually leading to a divorce. After my father retired, he lived alone in that house, but he got into trouble with the neighbors over garbage disposal, and his house was vandalized. Even though he was the one at fault, he never apologized and continued to act arrogantly, making him disliked by the neighbors as a difficult old man. After the divorce, my mother, who should have been able to live a modest life with the division of property from my father, encountered a too-good-to-be-true offer through someone she met related to Rolla. She was promised a debut in the entertainment industry as an ageless beauty model and was convinced to make an investment in her beauty, including walking lessons and expensive beauty products, spending an outrageous amount of money. But as you may have guessed, it was a scam. It was impossible for my mother, who was well past 60, with a body that showed her indulgent lifestyle, to enter the entertainment industry. She probably didn't realize this because she was basking in the admiration that Rolla received, thinking it was her own. She should have faced reality much sooner. As a result, my mother ended up with a huge debt, no job due to bad knees, and a very difficult situation. She relied on a friend, who was also single and divorced, for a place to stay, but was kicked out again when that friend got remarried. Even now, if only Rolla would come back. If only she were here. She seems unable to accept reality, saying, "We don't know what her situation is now. If she's lucky, she might have a part-time job, but the standard of living she had when she was with my father, a banker, will never come back." My mother, who loved luxury, is likely living in poverty and loneliness now. As for us, Rolla has overcome her mental health issues and regained her beauty. She had always said she had no dreams of a family and remained single, but recently she got a boyfriend. We might hear some happy news soon. Nancy also got married, had children, and is now a mother of 3. And as for me, I had given up on having children or even getting married due to my condition worsening with childbirth. But I was able to marry someone. "You don't have to have children. I just want to be with you," who understood everything and said. He was a colleague from my previous job. When he first asked me out, "I might not be able to have children, so I can't think about marriage. You shouldn't be with someone like me," I repeatedly told him. But for some reason, he really liked me, even though I was not particularly beautiful. He said, "I don't know why, but I feel so at ease when I'm with you. Maybe this is what being compatible means." Laughing. He himself had suffered from mental health issues due to his parents' divorce. Everyone gets sick at some point as they age, so having 1 or 2 illnesses doesn't change anything about you. He reassured me, saying, even so, we were dating with the intention of getting married but couldn't take that step until, unexpectedly, I got pregnant despite being very careful. From there, the marriage plans quickly moved forward. When I think back, I wonder if it was my child who gave me the courage to finally decide to get married. I guess it was fate. Since getting married, I've been living modestly but happily, surrounded by my gentle and kind husband and our adorable daughter. My health condition worsened temporarily after giving birth, but thanks to the development of good medication, I'm now very stable and living a normal life. I even enjoy dancing with my mom friends in a dance circle. Although I get tired more easily than others, the circle is very flexible, so I can participate as I like. Whether it's because of the new medication or the reduced stress in my life, I've slimmed down from my previous weight. Though I still have a bit of cellulite that bothers me. My life is still ahead of me. Write up the divorce papers and get out right now. I have no intention of living with you anymore. My husband Edward returned from his overseas business trip, bringing along his mistress, 12 years his junior, and their secret elementary school-aged child. And now, he suddenly tells us to get out of the house. Despite his own infidelity, he has the audacity to act all high and mighty. Unable to stand it any longer, our daughter Margaret delivers a shocking statement to her father. "Dad, you don't know anything, do you? You'll regret saying things like that." It's because you keep treating Mom so badly that this is happening. What on earth are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying at all. Are you that upset about being abandoned by me? I think you'll understand everything once you see this. It's not like I'm upset about being abandoned by you, Dad. As long as I have Mom, I can live happily. What do you mean, once I see this? As Edward peers at her smartphone, his face instantly turns pale. He must have realized the gravity of what he has done. My name is Kristen, and I'm 44 years old. I have only one child, Margaret, whom I gave birth to shortly after starting my career. Margaret, who I thought was little, has suddenly become a college student. I always thought I was the more mature one, but she has grown up completely and surpasses me in many ways. I came from a poor family, so I always attended public schools. As for college, I had to pay my own tuition while attending. I hated that so much that we, as parents, are paying for her tuition. However, she doesn't take it for granted and is incredibly grateful to us. She always expresses her gratitude, so as a mother, I often think she's grown up to be a good kid. Mom, I'm having so much fun in college. I didn't think it would be such an enjoyable place, so I'm really happy. Thank you for letting me go to college even though the tuition is high. I'm happiest when you're enjoying yourself, Margaret. I know there will be hard times along with the fun, but do your best. If anything happens, you can always come to me. I think it's such a luxury to be able to study. Since you're paying for my tuition, I'll work hard at studying too. I've decided to get a good job and be a filial daughter. When did you become a child who could say such things? I'm so glad you've grown up to be such a good kid, Margaret. We should thank Dad too for paying your tuition. Of course I'm grateful to Dad too, but Mom is number one. You work and do all the housework, which I think is really amazing. Dad doesn't do any housework at all, which I think is terrible. I do wish he would do a little housework. But Dad works hard at his job, so it's hard for me to say anything. But I do think things can't go on like this. Edward travels frequently for work, both domestically and internationally, and does practically no housework. Of course, he earns a good income because of all the business trips, but I wish he would spend a little more time with us. Money is important, but when we spend so little time together, I start to wonder what we got married for. It's no exaggeration to say that I raised her almost entirely on my own until she became a college student. So Margaret isn't attached to Edward at all, and in fact, dislikes him for neglecting our family. I want us to be a happy family, so I do wish they would get along, but he's away from home so much that I feel it can't be helped. Why does Dad go on so many business trips? He's been going on trips all the time since I was little. Is he always busy? I don't feel like he values his family. Please don't say such lonely things, Margaret. Dad is working hard for us too. It's because he works so hard that you can go to college. Of course I know that, and I'm grateful, but I do think he's away from home too much. He's not home for more than half the year, and even when he is home, he doesn't even talk to us. He used to talk to us in the past, but lately I feel like he's always on his smartphone. I wonder why he's become like that. I noticed when Margaret pointed it out, but Edward has been acting a bit strange lately. Even when we try to talk to him, he ignores us and is constantly on his smartphone. He's barely home, and even during that time, he won't have a conversation with us, so I really don't know if there's any point in being together. Apparently, she was also concerned about that. It's understandable for her to feel that way when her own father won't talk to her at all. I didn't want Margaret to feel stressed, so I decided to talk to Edward when he got home. Hey, you haven't been talking to us at all lately. What's going on? You seem to be on your smartphone all the time, and I'm worried about what you're doing. That's none of your business, is it? It's up to me what I do on my smartphone. I'm not inconveniencing you, so it should be fine. I know you're busy with work, but I wish you would value your time with family a little more. Margaret seems to feel the same way I do. We're talking right now, aren't we? We're not newlyweds anymore, so of course we won't talk that much. Margaret should just get a boyfriend and move out. Why are you saying such lonely things? We're family, so let's get along better. I understand that you're busy with work and tired, but if you understand that I'm tired, then don't talk to me. I don't want to waste energy having conversations all the time. I'm the one earning money, so I don't deserve to be complained at by anyone. I get it, but you've changed. You were so kind when we got married. You always put Margaret first. People change over time. She is an adult now, so she should become independent from her parents. Why don't you try letting go of her a little? I think it's fine since she's still a student. I'll talk to her about it. I mustered up the courage to talk to him, but Edward shows no signs of changing at all. Instead, he got angry at me for interfering. I never thought things would turn out like this, so I don't know how to react. I couldn't believe that the kind Edward had changed this much. Margaret seemed to have noticed somehow, but I hadn't paid much attention, so I had no idea. When did he really become like this? He acts like he doesn't care about family at all and won't listen to anything I say. Since I had already told Edward, I decided to talk to Margaret just in case. I don't know how Edward will react when he realizes the message hasn't gotten through. I talked to Dad earlier, and he told me to let go of you. He said you should become independent too, but what do you think about that? I think it's fine since you're still a student, but it's terrible for him to say that to you, Mom. I'm loved by you and so happy. And other families get along much better. I'm so relieved to hear you say that, Margaret. When Dad said it, I wondered if I should let go. But hearing it from you, I don't think I need to yet. If you were super overprotective, I might say something, you know? But Mom, you keep a really good distance. I find it really easy to live with you. I had no idea you felt that way, Margaret. If you say so, I'll keep treating you the same way. I'm sorry for making you worry unnecessarily. Mom, you don't need to apologize at all. I think it's Dad's fault for not doing anything to raise me. How can he act so high and mighty when he doesn't do any parenting? He's respected at work, so his need for approval is being met. I'm sure he's on his smartphone working too. But it's really sad that Dad has changed. Is Dad really working on his smartphone? I'm not even sure if he's really going on business trips. I think we should look into various things. When Margaret said that, it hit me. I've never suspected Edward of cheating. He's always been kind to our family, so I've never once thought he was suspicious. But recently, he hasn't been kind to us, so I thought maybe I should be a little suspicious. I wouldn't have thought about it if Margaret hadn't mentioned it, but I think this might be some kind of turning point. However, I didn't know what to do, so I decided to go on as I had been. While I was doing that, she suddenly told me she had something important to talk about. She's never said that before, so I'm incredibly nervous. What on earth is this important thing? It's not like you to say that, Margaret. Did something happen at school? I'm sorry. It's really hard for me to say, so I'm stumbling over my words. It's something I absolutely have to say, but I wonder what you'll think of me if I tell you, Mom. What? It's such an important thing that you're stumbling over your words. I thought it would be a lighter topic, so I'm getting nervous. But I'll accept anything, so I want you to try talking to me. I think it'll be pretty shocking for you. I'll tell you if you say you'll listen, and I'm not completely sure yet. If you've said this much, it's harder not to listen. I'd like you to tell me everything if you're okay with it, Margaret. Of course, if you don't want to talk, that's totally fine. Actually, I peeked at Dad's smartphone the other day, and it seems like he's cheating. I think he's saying he's on business trips and cheating. What exactly does that mean? I have no idea what you're talking about, Margaret. What kind of messages was he sending on his smartphone? It's too sudden, and I don't know what Margaret is saying. Certainly, we're only told he's going on business trips, so it's unclear if he's really going on them. But his salary is being properly deposited, so I thought he was going on business trips. However, from what Margaret is saying, it seems he is cheating at his business trip destinations. I never even considered that. I don't know how to react. My friends have asked me if I'm not worried about his constant business trips, but I wasn't worried at all. That's because I trusted Edward, and if what Margaret is saying is true, that trust will quickly crumble. Then she told me the contents of Edward's smartphone. It seems there's someone like a mistress at the place he frequently goes on business trips to. There was also a child's name, so he might have a child too. I don't know if it's a stepchild or a secret child, but I can't believe this is happening. If that's true, it's unforgivable. I won't be satisfied unless I get proper revenge. You should get solid evidence and then divorce him. Don't worry about me at all, okay? Thank you so much for saying that. If he is really cheating, I'll divorce him. And if he has a child, that's a pretty big problem. I've got your back, Mom, so don't worry. I'll support you properly. You don't need to show any kindness to him anymore. With Margaret saying that, I have no choice but to do my best. For now, I've decided to investigate to make sure whether Edward is cheating. The investigation is a simple one. I'll check his smartphone while he's sleeping to see who he's in contact with. I thought if I saw the name of the person he's cheating with and the content of the messages, I'd also find out about the child. When I told Margaret about it, she said she'd cooperate. She knows more about smartphones, so I'm very grateful for her help. I decided to take responsibility if anything happens and try to investigate the affair. However, when I picked up the smartphone, there was a passcode on it and I couldn't see the contents. Then she said some comforting words. I peeked when he was on his smartphone the other day, so I know his smartphone passcode. He probably let his guard down thinking you wouldn't find out, Mom. I had no idea you'd go that far for me, Margaret. I never could have done it on my own, so that's a relief. But I'm nervous to look at the contents of the smartphone. Normally, I don't think it'd be nerve-wracking at all. I mean, you're just looking at the contents of a family member's smartphone. In a typical household, there shouldn't be anything you wouldn't want seen. That may be true, but the situation is different this time. What if there's a history with the person he's cheating with in there? I don't think I can handle it emotionally. In a way, it might be good to give up at that point. I mean, you'll have the evidence, so all that's left is to get divorced. I think it's better than feeling vaguely unsettled. When you say that, I'm starting to feel that way. Why are you more put together than me, Margaret? I should be the calm one. I've barely felt any love from Dad in my memory. But it's normal for you, Mom, since you married Dad after dating. I don't want you to be so negative about yourself. Thank you for saying that. I'm a little scared, but let's look at the contents. And so, we decided to look at the contents of Edward's smartphone. If the information Margaret said she saw is true, there should be a message history with the person he's cheating with. Honestly, I don't know if it's better for there to be none or for there to be some. But if he really is cheating, I want to get divorced soon, so I want to get evidence here. As I was thinking that, Margaret unlocked his smartphone for me. When the two of us peeked inside, there was a message history with a woman we didn't know. It seems what Margaret said was true, and apparently Edward is cheating. And when we scrolled back through the messages, we found out they'd had a relationship for nearly 10 years. I can't believe he's been cheating on me for that long. As I was reeling in shock, Margaret gently comforted me. This must be really shocking for you, Mom. But now that we have the evidence, let's think positively. Let's make sure to save the contents of these messages. If I didn't have you, Margaret, I couldn't stay calm. Honestly, I believed in him. I never thought he was actually cheating on me. It's admirable that you believed in him until the end. Dad is the worst for betraying you like this, Mom. We definitely have to knock him down to rock bottom. Lately, I've just been relying on you, Margaret. I feel like I've reached a turning point, so I'm going to get revenge. Let's think about how to get revenge together. Dad is going on a business trip starting tomorrow, right? So we have plenty of time to think. But you absolutely can't show any kindness. Since he cheated, you have to punish him harshly. I understand. I'll harden my heart and get revenge. I'll be counting on you if anything happens, Margaret. But will you be okay if your dad is gone? It's always been like he's not here with all the business trips. At this point, nothing will change if he's gone. I'll protect you when it comes to you, Mom. It's really reassuring and helps so much. If you say that, Margaret, I can get divorced with peace of mind. Let's do our best together from now on. And so we started thinking about how to get back at Edward. I used to feel very lonely when he said he was going on a business trip, but now I'm very grateful. Edward isn't home, so we can plot as much as we want. That said, I've never gotten divorced before, so I don't know what to do. Anyway, I'll prepare for the divorce while consulting with people around me. Of course, he doesn't know that, and I'm sure he's cheating at his business trip destination. I feel bad having Margaret do this as a college student, but it's for Margaret's sake too, so I have no choice but to ask for her cooperation. Margaret seems to want to cooperate and is actively helping. I don't know when she grew up so much, but I'm truly grateful. While we were planning like that, I got a call from Edward at his business trip destination. It's rare for him to call from a business trip, so I think something must have happened. I have something important to talk about when I get back from this business trip. So tell Margaret to be at home. It's about the future, so make absolutely sure to be home. It's scary to have you suddenly say that. It's rare for you to call from a business trip. Did something happen while you were away? I'll give you the details next time, so just wait. This concerns Margaret too. Also, tidy up the stuff in the house as much as you can. Why do I suddenly have to tidy up? Don't tell me we're going on the business trip with you? If so, I wish you'd tell me in advance. Well, it might be something similar to that. Anyway, I think it's best to be ready to leave the house at any time. Also, clean up the room so it's ready for guests. I don't have time for that on such short notice. You know I have a job too, right? Why do you keep saying such selfish things? I'm working on business trips, so put up with it. If you say you can't clean, have Margaret do it. Make sure the room is clean no matter what. Why won't you even tell me who's coming? And if we're going somewhere, I wish you'd tell me. There are too many mysteries. It's hard to deal with. It's not difficult at all, right? Just pack your own things and keep the room clean. If that's too hard, just leave it all to Margaret. Margaret is busy with college too, you know? Why don't you do it together when you get back? Don't dump everything on us. I can tell from the conversation, but Edward is clearly acting strange. It seems like he's plotting something, and it feels like he's smiling a little. I'm sure he intends to do something to us. I don't know what he'll do, but I think I'll prepare so I'm ready for anything. For that, I need to prepare for the divorce too. I have a lot of preparations to make too, so I don't have time to do what he is telling me to do. Those emotions overflowed and I ended up arguing emotionally. But Edward must have something he's really happy about, because he deliberately didn't get emotional and tried to calm me down. I'll make this the last time, so I'm really begging you. I'm coming back with some important guests. I want to welcome them, so please prepare. If you had told me that from the beginning, I would have dealt with it. Why did you talk to me in such a high-handed way? Anyone would hate being spoken to like that. I'm sorry. Please forgive my words and actions earlier. I'll speak more kindly from now on. Is it okay if I really ask just this once? It feels suspiciously kind somehow. You won't even tell me who you're bringing. Well, I'll let it slide just this once. So you'll clean up for me? If so, that would really help. I'll make sure to buy souvenirs on my way back. You haven't brought souvenirs lately, but you're being quite kind. I have no choice, so I'll at least clean for you. Then, I'll be waiting for you to come home. I don't know who Edward is bringing, but the fact that Edward has clearly become kinder means there must be something behind it. It's definitely strange for Edward to approach me from below. Of course, there's a possibility that's not the case, but we need to take some countermeasures too. For that reason, I have no choice but to prepare for divorce before Edward returns. When I told Margaret about the call from Edward, she seemed to have the same opinion as me and said we should prepare quickly. It's definitely suspicious, so let's prepare for various things. But who do you think he's bringing back? He wouldn't bring back the person he's cheating with, right? There's no way he'd bring them to our place. I'm sure he's bringing his boss from work or something. He did say he wanted the room cleaned. You're right, there's no way he'd bring them to our place. That would be like admitting he's cheating. But let's be prepared for anything. I'm so glad I have you on my side, Margaret. If you weren't here, I'd really be struggling. I'm so glad I can be on your side, Mom. I'm sure there will be more hard times ahead, but let's do our best together. Anyway, let's strategize against him. And so Margaret and I started preparing together. Even while preparing, we kept discussing the future. Since we plan to divorce Edward, it's natural for the conversation to go that way. I think Margaret is anxious about what we'll do going forward, so I want to reassure her as much as I can as a mother. For that, I have to do what I need to do properly. I think it will be quite difficult, but I believe we can be happier than we are now. For a slightly happier life in the future, we have no choice but to do our best now. As I was thinking that, Edward came back a day earlier than planned. That's never happened before, so I'm quite surprised. When I went to greet him, for some reason there was a woman holding a child next to Edward. Who is the woman next to you? I don't think we've met. I'm sorry if it's someone I've met before. I'm sorry for the sudden notice, but write up the divorce papers and leave. This is my new wife and child. We'll be living in this house together from now on, so you two live somewhere else. Edward looks incredibly satisfied. I think he's been waiting for this moment. But Margaret couldn't take it anymore and pointed out the problem to Edward. Dad, you don't know anything. You're the one who will regret saying that. This is happening because you keep treating Mom terribly. What on earth are you talking about? I don't understand what you're saying. Are you that bitter about being abandoned by me? I think you'll understand everything when you see this. It's not like I'm bitter about being abandoned by you, Dad. As long as I have Mom, I can live happily. What do you mean, when I see this? As Edward said that and peeked at Margaret's smartphone, his face instantly turned pale. He must have seen the contents of the messages Margaret showed him and couldn't hide his surprise. Those messages were the ones Edward had with the person he was cheating with, transferred to Margaret's smartphone. In other words, it's proof that we had realized he was cheating all along. If he was shown something like that, of course he wouldn't be able to hide his surprise. Why do you have those messages? When did you find those messages? Unfortunately, I noticed the cheating a little while ago. So I'm not surprised to be told you're cheating. If anything, I'm wondering why you're telling me now of all times. I know you have been cheating for 10 years. And I knew he had a child with the person he's cheating with too. I can't believe you do that behind our backs. Well, if you knew, I told you to pack your things, right? Get out of this house right now, and thanks for cleaning up. The child is still young, so I thought it'd be better if it was clean. You didn't show any consideration for us at all. But you're being so kind to your child with the person you cheated with. You've really changed. I don't care about that. Just get out already. I'm going to live a happy life in this house from now on. You're in the way, so disappear from my sight right now. Sorry, but you can't live in this house. I feel bad for the child, but it's your fault for cheating. What do you mean I can't live in this house? I won't stand for that. I will absolutely be happy in this house. Edward seems quite shaken, perhaps because he can't come to terms with the situation. He's probably in a rush because he thought everything would go according to his plan. I'm sure he bragged to the person he was cheating with that he had a house. It's true this is Edward's house, but it's not his property alone. So as long as he was cheating, we can't hand over this house. I have solid evidence of the cheating, so I've decided to get compensation. And you have no savings at all, so you can't pay, right? So instead, I've decided to take this house as compensation. No way! It makes no sense to bring a new person before divorcing. No matter how you look at it, you should have known it would turn out like this, right? Were you too selfish to realize it? I guess you're right. He seemed to have realized everything and collapsed to his knees. He probably thought everything would go his way because we always did what he said. In the end, I didn't hand the house over to Edward and took it as compensation. Apparently, he had really appealed to the fact that he had a house, and when he told the person he cheated with and their child that the house was gone, they ran away. I thought the person he cheated with was after money, but Edward says he had no idea. I didn't think he was such a pathetic person, so I'm despairing at my lack of judgment. That said, there's no point in saying that now, so I'm going to try to live positively from now on. And while Margaret and I were moving on, Edward suddenly showed up at the house. He hadn't contacted us at all, so I didn't know why he came, but I decided to deal with it anyway. We're already divorced, so why did you come here? I have nothing more to say to you, so please go somewhere else quickly. If you stay here any longer, I'll have to take appropriate action. You don't have to say such harsh things. We were originally husband and wife, so why don't we start over? I think that would make Margaret feel more at ease too. I don't think of you as a father anymore. Don't get involved in our lives anymore. I don't know anyone who would cheat and abandon their family. Why are you saying such cold things too, Margaret? I'm the only father in the world that Margaret has. I definitely think it would be more fun to live together as a family. If you really keep clinging to us any longer, I'll call the police. If you don't like that, then please disappear from our sight quickly. And never show yourself in front of us again. I see. I understand. It would be bad if the police were called, so I'll go home. With that, Edward went back to his own home. It seems that being abandoned by everyone has made him feel incredibly lonely all at once. From what I've heard from acquaintances, Edward is struggling quite a bit with paying compensation and child support, but I think it's his own fault. That said, I don't understand the nerve of him to betray us like that and then take such actions. I've decided to live happily with just Margaret and I from now on, so I've resolved not to compromise with him. It seems Margaret feels the same way as me and doesn't need a father. Hearing that truly puts me at ease. From now on, I want to live supporting each other, just two of us. My name is Kate. I'm a 48-year-old homemaker. In this day and age, some might think being a homemaker is enviable. But I'm not the kind of homemaker who lives in luxury on my husband's earnings. Ben, should I help you wipe down? I'm sorry. Ben, who's in his mid-60s, had a stroke a decade ago when he was still full of energy. Since then, he's been bedridden. All this time, I've been caring for him. We used to worry about not being able to have children when we were younger. But now I see it as a blessing that allows me to devote myself to caregiving. Life is strange, isn't it? Ben's body doesn't move as he wishes, but his mind is clear. Maybe that's why. He always seems to feel sorry towards me. But I wish he wouldn't. I don't find this life too burdensome. Sure, caregiving support services have increased compared to the past, and it's not like I can't take a break at all. But I started caregiving in my 30s, and now I'm in my 40s. I can't deny that my physical strength isn't what it used to be. So, naturally, I wish for some support. From my husband. Could you give me a hand? And then, I'm busy right now. Tom, my husband said. I might understand if he were actually working. But how is lying on the sofa and fiddling with his mobile phone busy? If you're just looking at your phone, help out. It's your dad, after all. I'm supporting by working, aren't I? Let me rest at least on my days off. Saying that, my husband frowned irritably and stood up to leave the room. It's always the same. He doesn't lift a finger. Even if he can't help with caregiving, it would be nice if he at least took care of himself. My husband, hand on the door, turned back and said, "Oh yeah, I have a business trip for the next 3 days. Get everything ready." Again? Can't you at least? I'm busy. You should do that much as a wife. Shouting, my husband left the room. Does preparing himself challenge his pride? We're supposed to support each other as a married couple. How did it come to this? No choice. I'll get some help after the helper comes. I sighed and kept staring at the door through which my husband had left. Is that boy off on a business trip again? The night my husband left for his trip, as I was drinking coffee, Linda showed up. Linda, who can't get by without her cane due to mobility issues, is otherwise sharp. While Ben was sleeping, I took a break and helped Linda sit down by taking her hand and guiding her to a chair. After taking a sip of the freshly brewed coffee and exhaling, Linda said with a hint of sadness, "He's always away on business trips several times a month. I wonder if that's really the case." Well, who knows? Linda and I are probably thinking the same thing. Harboring the same suspicions. Infidelity. That word flickers through my mind. But I deliberately don't voice it. What difference does it make if I find out about my husband's infidelity? He'll surely deny it, and gathering evidence would cost money and effort. But I don't have the luxury to deal with that right now. My affection for my husband is almost non-existent. And naturally, his affection towards me is the same. But having lost my own parents early, my in-laws are as precious to me as my own. I can't abandon them. After all, my husband does contribute financially to the household, so maybe it's better to leave his issues be. After a long life of caregiving, I've given up. It wasn't always like this. My husband used to be kind to me when we were distressed about not being able to have children. He used to be dutiful to his parents. But as soon as the caregiving for his parents began, he changed as if he were a different person. Acting on his own whims, almost as if he was single. He started leaving home frequently, claiming he was on business trips. He grew colder, not just towards his parents, but towards me as well. "You're such an unattractive woman, eating with you ruins my appetite." After being bluntly told that, we started eating separately. Now, my husband eats alone, while I feed Ben and share meals with Linda. "I don't want to sleep in the same room." Since he said that, I've been sleeping on the living room sofa. But the kind and grateful words from my caring in-laws somehow kept me going. Just when I was feeling the distance from my husband, another troubling issue arose. The money my husband was bringing home decreased. Despite discussing various problems, he stubbornly insisted his salary had decreased. But I knew he was lying. I happened to see his pay stub. To my surprise, his salary had actually increased. I wondered if he had received a promotion, but that wasn't the important part. The problem was that he was lying and reducing the money for the household. That's quite a sum for your parents' taxi, fares to the hospital, and hiring helpers. Our living expenses are. What? Managing with the money provided is a homemaker's duty. If you can't do that, you're failing as a homemaker. If you can't even manage that, what value do you have? No matter how much I pleaded, my husband wouldn't listen. Seeing this, my in-laws seemed apologetically again. They even offered their meager pensions to help with the living expenses. Feeling sorry, I struggled to make ends meet with the money my husband gave. As a result, our meals became vegetable-centered and modest. My in-laws claimed to prefer such meals, but my husband would say, "How can I eat such plain food?" And he started dining out every night. Consequently, the money he brought home decreased even more. A vicious cycle that also lessened his time at home. And in proportion, my spirit dwindled away. On that particular day, Ben's condition suddenly worsened. A stroke had recurred. In no time at all, Ben passed away. Initially, I was stunned, but then tears wouldn't stop flowing. Linda and I hugged and cried in front of Ben, who looked as if he were merely sleeping. At that time, my husband was, yet again, on a business trip. When I finally calmed down a bit and called him, "Hello? Who's this?" A woman answered the phone, to my shock. My husband was in the midst of an affair. "Hey, don't just pick up like that." I heard my husband's voice, sounding flustered as he snatched the phone away. Normally, I'd be seething with anger in such a situation. But having just lost Ben, my heart felt numb, and I was surprisingly calm. Without confronting him about the affair, I simply informed him that Ben had passed away. "Oh, really?" His response was disconcertingly brief. Can someone be this indifferent about their own father's death? To me, my husband seemed as alien as a being from another planet. No, that's an insult to aliens. Even in space, I believe there's some sense of parent-child bond. Throughout the funeral, my husband maintained a detached demeanor, merely going through the motions of being the chief mourner. Relatives consoled the grieving Linda. Meanwhile, the actual son seemed to spend most of the time fiddling with his mobile phone and yawning. Everyone looked at my husband with disdain. Because of him, Ben's funeral, whom I dearly loved, became a dismal affair. A month passed since then. Between dealing with the aftermath of Ben's death and caring for Linda's mental health, time flew by. My husband was in an exceptionally good mood today. Because today was the day Ben's will was to be disclosed. Ben had prepared a notarized will, which doesn't require court verification. It was kept in the lawyer's office. Today, Linda was to bring it from the office and open it. Normally, one would assume the inheritors to be Linda, the wife, and my husband, the only son. I wondered if there was really a need for a will. Could there be a secret child? With bated breath, I watched the proceedings, reminding myself that as a DIL, I had no rights to the inheritance. The lawyer, called in for this day, along with relatives of both in-laws, were present as witnesses. As everyone watched, the lawyer opened and read the will. That was, Linda was to inherit the house and land, and half of all other assets. That was expected. But what followed was shocking. The remaining half wasn't left to my husband, the son. What? Kate and I are to inherit the remaining half equally? My husband stood up, shouting in disbelief. Indeed. The will unexpectedly left part of the inheritance to me. Stunned, I watched as my husband pointed at me and yelled furiously. "Why does my wife have to take the inheritance? I'm the real son. Everything, apart from Mom's share, should obviously come to me. But the will states, I don't care. It's invalid. Invalid." My husband screamed at the lawyer. I was speechless, shocked by the sudden turn of events. But what my husband said next left me completely astounded. "I was the one who mostly took care of Dad. She didn't do much." What? What is this man saying? I already knew he was a liar, but this lie was too much. He took care of Ben mostly? Who could say such a thing? I couldn't stay silent anymore and was about to speak when. "What are you talking about? Have some shame, you foolish son." The shout didn't come from me. Unexpectedly, it was Linda. A dramatic soundtrack seemed to play as Linda's face filled the screen. Or at least, that's how it felt. Then, a close-up of my husband's shocked face. Silence fell over the room. Linda, usually so quiet and never raising her voice, had taken us all by surprise. My husband, stunned by her uncharacteristic fierceness, was speechless. In the midst of this, Linda continued. "Mostly took care of Ben, you say? Which mouth of yours is saying that? You do nothing but play with your phone or watch TV every day. You don't even eat at home. You barely contribute any money to the household. And to top it off, you lie about business trips to cheat. You really don't deserve a cent of the inheritance." What? Is that true? Reacting to Linda's words were Ben's brothers. Strong-looking men due to their construction business. Confronted by these imposing figures, my husband seemed even smaller. "Eh? What do you mean? Mom, I might not have been home much, but the affair accusation is just baseless. Don't make random claims without any evidence." My husband was stuttering and sweating in panic. Without missing a beat, Linda produced a large envelope. Where did that come from? Did she have it hidden? I hadn't noticed it at all. "Do you know what this is? It's filled with evidence of your affairs. I didn't think Kate, who worked so hard taking care of Ben, would have the means. So Ben and I hired a detective. Be prepared." With that, Linda scattered the contents of the envelope. After my husband's scream, the relatives reacted. "What is this? Ugh, that's disgusting. Really, my eyes feel dirty now." The reaction from the relatives was one of disappointment. The contents were numerous embarrassing photos of my husband and his mistress. What are they even doing outdoors? I didn't know my husband had such hobbies. Never thought I'd discover such hidden sides of my husband after 20 years of marriage. Like the relatives, I was appalled. "Shame on you. Doing such disgraceful things. Claiming you took care of Ben, saying Kate did nothing. Insisting the inheritance is all yours. How dare you say such things? You shameless, unfilial son. Apologize to Kate. It's not like that. This is wrong. It's not wrong, you foolish son." "Linda, calm down, please. You'll burst a blood vessel. It's too early to follow Ben." Perhaps it was Linda's towering rage that allowed me, the one who should be most upset, to remain calm. "Linda, please calm down. Breathe in, breathe out, inhale, exhale. That foolish son." After some deep breathing, Linda calmed down a bit. But her anger was far from subsiding. Seeing her like this made me start to laugh. "Kate?" Surprised, Linda looked at me as I suddenly burst into laughter. I smiled at Linda and then hugged her. Thank you so much, Linda. Kate? For getting angry on my behalf, for conducting such an investigation for me. I really appreciate it. Of course. You are my precious daughter, after all. Daughter. I never realized how happy being called that could make me. Since Ben's passing, I've become quite teary, and once again, tears welled up. But I can't spend all my time crying. After stepping away from Linda, I wiped away my tears roughly and looked at my husband. You. What? Let's get a divorce. Fine by me, I'll gladly do it. I desperately suppressed another wave of laughter and then confirmed with my husband. So, about the will, about the inheritance? All right, I accept Dad's will. I looked at the lawyer, who slowly nodded. The lawyer was designated as the executor of the will. I was sure he would handle the following procedures smoothly. Taking a moment to breathe, I then moved on to another matter. Shall we begin? My statement was met with nods from Linda and the attending relatives. My husband was the only one who didn't understand. What more is there to discuss? To my clueless husband, I said with a smile. It's obvious, isn't it? The compensation claim for your affair. What? Why did he think it would all end here? With evidence of his infidelity right in front of us, it wasn't going to be just a divorce and goodbye. Don't joke! Compensation on top of the inheritance. What a greedy woman you are! Coming from someone who pushed the care of his parents onto his wife and had affairs. Really, the nerve. Don't joke is my line. We have a lawyer here, and plenty of witnesses, so why don't we have a thorough discussion? I just remembered something I have to do. What could be more important than what we're doing now? Don't run away, you fool! Before I could grab his hand, someone else grabbed my husband by the neck. It was Ben's brother, hardened by his construction work. Behind him stood Ben's equally formidable brother. They nodded in agreement. Muscles really do have an impact. After that, under the watchful eyes of the Muscle brothers, other relatives, and Linda, my husband couldn't flee. He had no choice but to stay and discuss until everything was settled. Today's another beautiful day. Looking up, the sky was cloudless and clear. Half a year had passed since then. Thanks to the lawyer, the inheritance proceedings went very smoothly. The divorce was finalized, and I was enjoying living alone. I really wanted to live with Linda, but now that we were strangers due to the divorce, Linda stubbornly refused, not wanting to make me her caregiver again. As a result, Linda moved into a nursing home with the money from selling the house. I visit her once a week. It seems like a wonderful place, and Linda seems happy. In the end, I feel like this was the best outcome. The house was sold. That means, essentially, the house was gone. As for my ex-husband, who was practically kicked out, well, according to the will, he received his share of the inheritance. He was overjoyed at first, but then his face turned pale. Why? Because the inheritance had almost vanished. The reason goes without saying. Compensation, of course. My husband's inheritance was gone. Not enough from the inheritance alone, so he also had to pay from his savings. As a result, my husband ended up penniless. And more than that, it seems his affair became known at his company. Particularly among the female staff, he was given the cold shoulder and became quite isolated, leading to a series of mistakes, it seems. That woman, she's my boss, but didn't defend me properly, he was saying over the phone. And it turns out that this boss was a woman and, astonishingly, the mistress was his boss. Maybe that explains the mysterious salary raise. But as soon as the affair came to light, he was dumped by the mistress, who also faced a demotion due to the affair and other ethics violations. I made sure she paid compensation too. That's only right. It's your fault I kept making mistakes and got fired. He tried to blame it all on me. But that's not my problem, is it? You got used to caring for Ben, so looking after me should be easy for you. He said, but no, that's entirely different. I couldn't respond with anything but laughter. So, I blocked his calls. I don't know what became of my husband after that. And I don't want to know. To forget about that foolish husband, I started working, and it turned out to be refreshing and enjoyable. The world is so much broader than I thought. A sense of excitement for a bright future welled up in me unknowingly. Gazing up at the contrails stretching straight across the blue sky, I squinted my eyes. Thank you for always taking care of my husband. I wrote this with a bright red permanent marker on the back of my husband who was passed out drunk. He wouldn't think that I knew about his daily affairs with younger women, under the guise of working late. But I knew everything. Suppressing the rage that made me want to claw at him, I left that message. It was a declaration of war to my husband's mistress. My husband, Darren, and I, Anita, both 38, got married 3 years ago. Both working, I mostly handle the housework since I work from home. We don't have kids, but I thought we were happily living together, a thought only I seem to have. I'll be working late tomorrow too. Don't wait up for dinner, go to sleep first. Darren, who started working late suddenly about 3 months ago. The frequency increased over time, and he started spending nights at the office twice a week. You've been working late a lot recently. You never used to. The economy's better, and we're busier. That's good, right? Yes, take care. I believed Darren's words and saw him off. But not only did Darren come home late, his attitude towards me grew colder. He used to invite me out on his days off, but now he barely spoke to me. How about we go out today? It's nice weather. I'm tired, maybe some other time. Then, let's watch a movie at home together. Not in the mood. I want some alone time, go away. Darren, barely lifting his face from his mobile phone, spoke with annoyance. On bad days, except for bathroom and meal times, he wouldn't leave his room all day. Is this all just stress from work? I was worried about Darren's changed behavior, but one day, my concern turned to suspicion. That day, Darren came home at 1 a.m., and I was still awake due to work. Anita, you're still up? I was working. Huh? The moment I took Darren's suit, I smelled an unfamiliar scent. Why does your suit smell like perfume? When I asked, Darren's face stiffened slightly as he sniffed his clothes. Then, he looked annoyed. I don't smell anything. You have hay fever, so you wouldn't notice. Yeah. Maybe it's from a female coworker who wears too much perfume. Must have rubbed off. You notice the perfume despite your severe hay fever? Well, yeah. She wears a lot. Darren's words sounded like a hasty, thoughtless excuse. Were you that close to her to smell it so strongly? I helped her when she almost fell. Darren licked his lips while saying this. A habit he had when lying. Really? You're not hiding anything from me? Stop nagging. Don't snoop around like a controlling woman. When I pressed him, Darren glared and stormed out of the living room. Is he really cheating? The next day, Darren left for work without breakfast and didn't return until after 9 p.m., ignoring all calls and messages from me. He only came back after midnight. Welcome home. I was worried. You didn't say you'd be working late today. I was swamped with work. I tried to contact you several times. At least reply to my messages. I told you I was busy. I'm going to sleep. Darren hastily retreated to the bedroom and slammed the door shut. Lately, even when going to bed, he turns his back to me, avoiding any contact. I just want to have a calm conversation. I approached the bedroom door and was about to knock. But then, I heard voices from inside and stopped. I just got home. I want to see you again, even though we just met. I want to see you too. When can you come next? Maybe I'll try to make it tomorrow too. I love you. Listening closely, I realized Darren was on a speakerphone call with a woman. He barely talks to me. Unable to hold back, I knocked and tried to listen through the door. Who are you calling at this hour? Why hide it? What are you doing, Anita? Angered, Darren swung the door open forcefully, knocking me down as I stood close by. It hurts. What are you doing? Anita, how dare you eavesdrop on my call? What a nerve! I was just curious who you were talking to at this time. I was discussing work with a colleague. But it didn't sound like that. Shut up. Always saying presumptuous things. I'll show you. Darren roughly picked me up and threw me outside the front door. Then he quickly shut the door and locked it. What are you doing? Open the door. Annoying woman in the house is just a nuisance. Stay quiet out there. This is too much, no matter what. It's your fault. Reflect on it spending the night on the ground. With those words, Darren's footsteps faded away into the house. Thrown out empty-handed, I couldn't even contact the apartment management. I had no choice but to spend the night at the entrance. The next morning, Darren came out before going to work and tossed the keys at me roughly. Did you reflect? If you learned your lesson, don't ever meddle again. After saying only what he wanted, Darren left for work without hearing my side. To be treated this badly. I can't stay silent. I'll gather evidence. A few days later, I decided to stake out his office as he claimed to be working late. Exiting the office at the regular time, Darren walked in the opposite direction of our home. Where is he going? Following him, he met up with a young, cute woman. I was shocked to see them walk arm in arm, boldly. I filmed them with my mobile phone as they entered a high-end French restaurant. When he dines with me, it's always at a family restaurant. The difference in treatment was both sad and frustrating. Suppressing my swirling emotions, I continued to watch. After their meal, they headed straight to a hotel. Now I have perfect evidence. I followed Darren several more times, gathering more evidence. It turned out, on days he said he was working late, he spent hours in a hotel, and nights he claimed to be staying over at work, he was at his mistress's house. I'll be at the office all night working tomorrow. Every day must be really tough. I bought some good wine today, how about we relax a bit? Since being thrown outside, I've been compliant, which seemed to please Darren, who happily agreed to a drink in the evening. Then he guzzled down the expensive wine and quickly got drunk. Thank you for always taking care of my husband. It's perfect. I wrote this message with bright red pen on Darren's back, partly as a declaration of war to his mistress. It seemed to have an effect because around 11 p.m. the next night, I received a call from Darren, who never initiates contact. Did he realize? Is this about the mistress? Wondering if it was Darren or his mistress. I nervously pressed the call button on my mobile phone. I'm so sorry. A woman's voice. I didn't recognize whose voice it was. So loud it crackled through the phone, making me pull it away from my ear. What? I'm really sorry. The mistress sounded panicked, not like she was making a hasty apology. I was surprised, this was not what I had expected. You didn't know about him? Yes. I wouldn't have been with him if I knew he was married. That's unfortunate. Her name is Lorna. A 28-year-old receptionist at Darren's client company. Deceiving a woman like this is the worst. I'm in shock. He even proposed to me. What? We were planning our wedding, looking at venues. I was so excited until I found the message in the shower room. She scrubbed off the message with a body brush as she would wash his back, pretending to feel sick, and went to bed early. I panicked thinking I couldn't marry him. After he slept, I checked his phone and saw your messages, realizing you were his wife. I didn't think you were unaware. I'm sorry for scaring you. No, I should apologize for what I did, even unknowingly. No need to apologize. You were promised marriage, you're a victim too. Betrayed by Darren, and to think he deceived such a genuine girl. I've never felt so disgusted with someone. In my heart, I decided to end my relationship with Darren. I'm going to divorce him. You should break up with him too. I want to, but I transferred about $10,000 to his account for our wedding expenses. Really? If our marriage was a lie, where's that money? Maybe he really planned to marry you? I don't want to marry such a terrible person. I want to get my money back and cut ties. That's better. But let's make him truly reflect on his actions. I couldn't let this go unchallenged. Thinking of a plan, I came up with an idea. Can you help me with something? Anything. Actually, I have a secret I haven't told Darren. She was obviously angry and shared a secret she kept from Darren. Thus, we joined forces to teach Darren a lesson. We secretly communicated and meticulously prepared. Over the next 2 weeks, the day of our retaliation arrived finally. I'll be working late again today. Might even stay overnight. You're always working hard. Take care not to overdo it. I smiled and saw Darren off, then contacted Lorna and went to her place to wait. Then, around 6 p.m., the doorbell of her house rang. I'm home. Work was exhausting today. Welcome back, Darren. Huh? When I appeared from the living room, Darren jumped as if he had seen a ghost. Dinner? Bath? Or divorce? Smiling, I thrust the divorce papers at him, making Darren drop his bag in panic. Anita, why are you here? Let's sit down and talk about it. Come, let's go to the living room. What are you plotting? You didn't do anything to Lorna, did you? Just come quickly. Okay. Seemingly shocked by my loud voice since I was a compliant recently, Darren hurried into the living room. There, Lorna sat on the sofa with a broad smile. Lorna, what is this all about? That's our line. How could you promise marriage to me when you have a wife? Well, let's hear the full story, shall we? I sat next to Lorna and Darren sat in front of us. I began interrogating Darren. He finally seemed to give in. Lorna was just a bit of fun. I was interested in younger girls. Gross. You're attractive too. But you know, eating the same thing every time gets boring, right? Sometimes you want to try something different. I'm disgusted. And why were you cold to me if that's the case? That's because I thought if I was cold to you, you'd be more devoted. I was too stunned by his reasoning to speak. Taking my place, Lorna glared at Darren. If you weren't serious about me, why did you promise to marry me? I thought marriage meant you'd give me money. Give me back my money. That's impossible. I've already spent it all. Are you kidding? What did you spend it on? I treated colleagues to slightly expensive lunches to be liked at work. And what else? I bought expensive coats and shoes to impress clients. To think you spent my savings on such things. I'll never forgive you. Lorna muttered in a low voice. I'll have you arrested for marriage fraud. What? Isn't that an overreaction for something like this? Additionally, I'm demanding $30,000 in compensation and $10,000 for the savings you spent. Wait a minute. This is too harsh. Darren's face turned pale with panic. Watching him, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. Anita, say something. Just accept the arrest quietly. I meant to Lorna. If your husband gets arrested, it'll be trouble, right? Not at all. I'm getting divorced anyway. At the moment Darren heard the word divorce from me, his face turned even paler. Divorce? You're joking, right? Why would I stay married to a cheating fraudster like you? You think you can live on your own after being a comfortable housewife all this time? I'm not just a housewife, I work from home. I can live perfectly fine without you. You mean you were actually working at home? I thought you were just pretending. Darren looked at me with surprise. I'm also demanding $30,000 in alimony for your infidelity. I can't pay anymore. What am I supposed to do if the amount increases? You'll have to work hard, I guess. You'll probably be fired from your current job though. Lorna is actually the daughter of the vice president of your client company. What? I thought she was just a receptionist. That was the secret she hadn't told Darren. I kept it hidden because I thought it'd be difficult to date if you knew my position. I've already informed her father about everything. Of course, your company knows too. I had already reported to Darren's boss about his marriage fraud with the receptionist and that a police report was filed, and his arrest was imminent. But I'm capable at work. Even if I get arrested, I'll have chances to keep working. There's no way they'll keep you. As soon as the facts are confirmed, you'll be disciplined by the company. Almost certainly fired. That's impossible. Darren held his head, making a face as if to say I'm in despair. It was nauseating. Lorna, let's get married after I divorce Anita. Then it won't be fraud, right? I refuse. Anita, let's start over. We can overcome this and become a real couple. Your jokes should be only that silly face of yours. Lorna and I kicked out the pitifully clinging Darren from the house and celebrated with a high five. Later, Darren and I divorced, and I demanded the planned alimony. Darren was found guilty of marriage fraud from Lorna's report. She also claimed alimony in damages. After being fired and burdened with a huge debt, it's hard for a criminal to find employment. Even his parents disowned him, and he now lives and works at a quite terrible workplace. Lorna and I became friends. We occasionally enjoy drinks together and have fun. Stop leeching off me, you useless thing. For over 20 years, I believed I had devoted myself to my husband, Thomas. Yet, this is what Thomas really thought of me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was merely devoted to him. But I can't put these thoughts into words. As my strength drains away, Thomas continues. Now that Richard is a working adult, you've got no reason to leech off me, right? But... Quiet. I don't want to hear your excuses. Thomas raises his voice. Oh, I can't do this anymore. My feelings will never reach him. At that moment, I hear something snap inside me. It's the sound of the thread of love that connected our hearts, breaking. At the same time, my feelings for him begin to fade. We were husband and wife until just now, but now he feels like a stranger. He had been using me from the start. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't blatantly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. No, I must bring him down thoroughly. With my mind made up, I lift my face and stare intently at him. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a 50-year-old housewife, married to Thomas for 25 years. Our son Richard, born a few years into our marriage, graduated from college and started working this year. Now my childrearing days have come to an end, I can finally do what I want. That's what I'm thinking now. But there's one problem. It's my relationship with Thomas. He is neither a good husband nor a good father. In fact, it's hard to find anything good about him. He cheats, and he doesn't properly contribute to the household expenses. Please, at least bring in enough for the living expenses. Huh? Don't get cocky when you're living off me. That's always his response. Maybe it's hopeless. Should I consider divorce? Lately, I've been thinking about it more and more. But I can't easily bring myself to mention divorce. The truth is, his father, Joseph, who is currently hospitalized and in poor health, entrusted Thomas to my care. I have to be grateful to Joseph and bear it as long as I can. His words can't be ignored. But the desire to divorce is strong. Caught between these conflicting emotions, I find myself reminiscing about happier times before our marriage. The trigger for that past happiness was a misfortune that befell my father, David. My family runs a small eatery. My father was in charge of cooking, and my mother served the customers. Needless to say, the food was delicious. But my father was incredibly bad at business. His dream was to feed delicious food to the customers. As many people as possible. A noble idea, I think. But that was the only thing he focused on in running the eatery. So he doesn't really think about profitability. Profit didn't matter as long as the customers were satisfied. That was his way of doing business. Obviously, it wasn't profitable. Consequently, our family finances were always tight. Nevertheless, as a child, I was proud to see the satisfied customers. So I never interfered with my father's business. However, during my college years, a crisis struck. The company supplying ingredients to our eatery went bankrupt due to unforeseen circumstances. We've already paid this month's bill. If this continues, we might have to close our restaurant. Our situation was already difficult. There was no extra money to spare. Seeing my parents so upset made me anxious, but as a college student, there wasn't much I could do. And it was unlikely that the bankrupt company could refund. Our only option seemed to be closing our eatery. That's when a regular customer of the eatery said, "Closing this eatery? It's too good for that. What a waste. But the company supplying us has gone bankrupt, and now we're in debt. Then let me help you personally, and you can revive the eatery with that." The regular, truly lending the money immediately to my father. "You've saved us. We'll definitely repay you. Don't worry about the money for now. Just keep making delicious meals." Saying that, the man left the shop. Afterward, my father started dealing with a larger food wholesaler, which offered ingredients at a cheaper rate. Fortune seemed to smile upon us, and our family's eatery was saved from bankruptcy. About a year later, I went with my father to return the money to that regular customer. While my father and the man talked, a young man approached me. "It seems you've borrowed money from my father." Listening to him, I learned that he was the son of the man who lent us money. His name is Thomas, and he works for his father's company. "You're beautiful. How about going out with me sometime?" "Me? Go out with you? Why not?" Think of it as a way to say thanks for the loan. It's true that we were helped by the loan. But my father had already properly thanked him. I don't feel obliged to go that far, but as I thought this, Thomas whispered to me, "The daughter of an eatery owner is ungrateful." I could spread that around, you know. But that's... I couldn't talk back. Even if he did spread rumors, I don't think it would harm me. But it could trouble my father. And what would the customers think? With these thoughts, I couldn't refuse his offer. I don't like it, but I'll tolerate it this once. With that thought, I went out with him. But it turned out to be more fun than I expected. He was interesting to talk to, and he knew lots of places to go. The restaurants he chose were all tastefully picked. Despite my initial bad impression, he might be a good person after all. Maybe it was wrong to think that way. I soon found myself being asked out by him. "I have fun when I'm with you." "I have fun too. It is my first time that I can think about marrying. If that was to you who are serious and good girl." Swayed by his simple words, I started a relationship with him, considering marriage. After that, he continued to guide me in various ways. Eventually, a few years later, I found myself married to him. Of course, I never thought at the beginning of our marriage that it was all a trap by him. He seemed genuinely kind, and I felt loved by him. But it was all a lie. As soon as we got married, his attitude changed drastically. "Here, this is my salary for the month. Manage it well." I opened the envelope he handed me. It was a salary statement. The salary itself was transferred to the bank, so it wasn't strange to receive only the statement. What struck me as odd was that the statement was handwritten. Nowadays, it's almost unheard of. But when I got married, 25 years ago, it was a time when personal computers were just becoming widespread, so a handwritten statement wasn't out of place. "There's over $1,000, so it should be enough, right?" I murmured to myself, trying to be convinced. I managed our life with that small amount of money. As our marriage continued, I gradually felt something was off. It was his lifestyle. He left home at a fixed time every morning. But his return was never at a set time. It varied day by day. I'm busy with various jobs as my father's successor. Then, could you call before coming home? Stop nagging. All right, I'll call, he shouted. His attitude made me feel even more uneasy. Maybe he's out playing around. Perhaps he even has an affair. I had these thoughts, but I was too scared of his shouting to confront him. In the end, I couldn't say anything, despite my doubts about his behavior. Eventually, our son Richard was born. I thought maybe he'd change a bit with a child. But he remained the same. Looking back, I think that's when I started considering divorce. Then, when Richard was about middle school age, I got a call from my mother while I was out shopping for dinner. What? Dad's in the hospital. It was news of my father's hospitalization. I rushed to the hospital. Mom's just exaggerating. My father laughed heartily. I felt relieved. But in that moment, I remembered something and my heart leaped. Oh no! I forgot to contact Thomas. By then, it was too late. My mobile phone was filled with countless calls from him. When I called back in a hurry, his displeased voice came through. Where are you? What are you doing? Hurry back and make my dinner. I'm sorry. My father. Huh? Your father? Your own father? Thomas asked in a slightly harsh tone. I answered in a small voice. Yes. He was suddenly hospitalized. Your father has nothing to do with it. You are my wife. I closed my eyes in fear at his shouting. I'm terrified of his loud voice. But I couldn't just let it go without responding. I braced myself and retorted. Isn't it natural to worry about one's father? That should be okay, right? Shut up. Don't talk back to me. No, I will say this. You would rush to your own father's side, wouldn't you? When I asked this, he suddenly fell silent. Putting himself in my shoes must have struck a chord. I thought so, but his reply was beyond my imagination. Huh? Even if my father was hospitalized, I'd ignore it. After all, I wouldn't be troubled if he wasn't around. I was speechless. This has to be a lie. That's what I thought, but I couldn't deny it. After much hesitation, I had said this to him. I'm not like you. Sorry, but eat out tonight. That was all I could say, my maximum effort. I hung up the phone, still in a daze. Since that incident, I truly couldn't believe him anymore. It was then that I finally realized that the happy times before our marriage were all an illusion. I see. He wanted a housekeeper, not a wife. Saying it out loud made me sad. But I couldn't just stay sad. That's right. If I'm going to divorce, I need to prepare. I started to prepare for the divorce. And then, a few years passed. This time, Thomas's father, Joseph, was hospitalized. And his condition was quite serious. He might not be able to leave the hospital, the doctor had said. I relayed Joseph's condition to Thomas. But Thomas remained unbothered. Does it mean it'll cost money? It's not the time to worry about money, don't you understand? I get it. I'll talk to my brother. Thomas contacted his brother James. James is married but doesn't have children. So Thomas suggested to James that he might be able to bear the hospital expenses. Can you pay for it? We have Richard and Elizabeth, and it's tough for us. He spoke as if it was someone else's problem. It reminded me of the time my father was hospitalized. It seemed he really didn't care about Joseph. I couldn't take it anymore. Enough. I'll figure something out and pay for Joseph's hospital bills. Don't forget what you just said, Thomas shouted. I nodded firmly. In the end, my words triggered us taking on the burden of Joseph's hospital expenses. Also, due to his illness, Joseph stepped down from his position as the president. And Thomas took over as the president. Regardless, Thomas didn't like that I had spoken up. Since then, he blatantly stopped coming home. Even when discussing Richard's future plans, Thomas ignored my calls and didn't return home. Dad's not coming home again today. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm causing you trouble. It's okay, I don't care about Dad. But I want to go to a university in Boston. That's right. Don't worry about the tuition, I'll manage it somehow. Soon after, Richard's enrollment in a Boston university was confirmed. Naturally, Thomas didn't see Richard off. Once Richard moved to Boston, the house suddenly became quiet. By then, Thomas was only coming home about once a week. There's also Joseph's hospital fees, could you transfer a bit more? Huh? I've already transferred over half of my salary. It should be enough for you alone. The amount Thomas transferred was just a little money. Clearly, it was only a fraction of his salary. Saying over half was definitely a lie. I knew that. But I didn't have the energy to complain. Years passed, and I received news that Richard had found a job. Richard has got a job now, it's probably a good time to talk about divorce. In these years, I had prepared for the divorce. It was just a matter of timing. When and where should I say it to avoid any trouble? Such thoughts constantly occupied my mind. It's not even about not wanting to cause a scene. I laughed at myself sarcastically. Then one day, I had been to visit Joseph. After chatting with Joseph as usual, I returned home. Reaching the entrance, I was startled. For some reason, the front door was unlocked. Could it be a burglar? Tentatively, I peeked inside the house. Then I heard the sound of the TV and Thomas's laughter coming from the living room. So Thomas was home. Relieved, I entered the living room. There, Thomas was watching TV, laughing loudly. You were home. Yeah, I thought I'd tidy up the house a bit. Tidy up? His words made me look around. On closer inspection, some items in the room were missing. Wait, it looks like some things are missing. Yeah, I threw them out. Your stuff. Threw out? My things? Shocked, I hurried back to my room. The room was empty. No computer, no TV, not even my favorite cup. Even the bed was gone. What's the meaning of this? I don't need them anymore, so I threw them out. Don't need them? What am I supposed to do now? I shouted, and Thomas frowned. Then he looked away and sighed. I guess. I'm tired of supporting you. What are you saying? I'm your wife. I retorted, and Thomas seemed irritated. He suddenly raised his voice. Do I have to spell it out? Stop leeching off me, you useless thing. For over 20 years, I believed I had devoted myself to my husband, Thomas. Yet, this is what Thomas really thought of me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was merely devoted to him. But I can't put these thoughts into words. As my strength drains away, he continues. Now that Richard is a working adult, you've got no reason to leech off me, right? But... Quiet! I don't want to hear your excuses. He raises his voice. Oh, I can't do this anymore. My feelings will never reach him. At that moment, I hear something snap inside me. It's the sound of the thread of love that connected our hearts, breaking. At the same time, my feelings for him begin to fade. We were husband and wife until just now, but now he feels like a stranger. He had been using me from the start. He never loved me. Otherwise, he wouldn't blatantly cheat and try to kick me out. I don't care what happens to such a man. No, I must bring him down thoroughly. With my mind made up, I lift my face and stare intently at him. What? Got a complaint? None. If you want me out, then I'll leave as you wish. I slammed the living room door shut, heading to my room. But there was nothing of mine left. Don't bother looking. I had the garbage collectors take everything away. Which company did you use? The flyer is right there. That's the one. I picked up the collector's flyer from the floor. As I called the number, I told him, "I'll make sure you regret this." Saying that, I left the house. Soon the call connected. I explained the situation, and they understood immediately. Apparently, they had sensed something off about his behavior. The garbage collectors had kept everything as it was when they picked it up. "I'll be there shortly. Thank you." I thanked them politely and hung up. Afterward, I visited the collector's location. I expressed my gratitude and had them move my belongings to a newly rented storage unit. I was relieved to find my belongings safe. He shouldn't think I'll just let this go. Grinding my teeth, I called Richard. I briefly explained the situation and then said, "So, I've decided to move out, considering a divorce. Richard, prepare yourself, okay?" "Oh, okay. Bye." Richard quickly ended the call. He seemed scared of me. Was I that angry? I wondered, storing my mobile phone in my bag. Then I headed to a nearby business hotel. Actually, I had already decided where to move. The reason was simple. I was planning to discuss divorce with Thomas soon. Divorce and then move there. That was my plan for starting a new life. Well, it's just a bit earlier than planned. Honestly, I wasn't in trouble. It was just moving things forward by about 2 weeks. 2 weeks in a hotel. What a waste. Can't be helped. But as a housewife, I couldn't help but think it wasteful. Maybe I should bill him for this hotel stay? Well, whatever it is, brace yourself, Thomas. I muttered and then started working on my post-divorce plans. About 10 days into my stay at the business hotel, Thomas called me during lunch. As soon as I answered, Thomas raised his voice. "You took my money." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called asking for payment." "Oh, that's what he's talking about." I sighed as I replied. "You should be the one paying, shouldn't you? I'm no longer related to this, having been kicked out. You've been receiving living expenses from me. It should have been paid from there." "Yes, that's true. But isn't the debit card for that bank account with you now?" I retorted calmly. However, I knew there was no money in that bank account. That's why I couldn't stop laughing. "I have the debit card, but there's no money in it. That's why I'm saying you took it." "I didn't take anything." "Don't lie. Who else could use it?" Didn't he realize that he had transferred too little? I replied in disbelief. "It was just too little money from the start. If there's no money for the hospital bills, why not use your own allowance?" "Allowance?" He started to panic, visibly confused. It seemed he thought I was unaware. Since the beginning of our marriage, he had been giving me handwritten salary statements. It was to hide the fact that he was siphoning off a portion of his salary. In other words, the skimmed money was his allowance. I once asked Joseph about your salary. "How much is Thomas earning?" "So, that's..." He looked puzzled but told me. So, I knew about the skimmed money. As I told him, he fell silent. There was a long silence, making me wonder if the call had dropped. Then suddenly, he raised his voice. "What's wrong with using the money I earned? It's your fault for using up the money I gave you." Okay. So? "We're getting divorced. I'm going to demand compensation. You'll pay back the money you spent." At that, I sneered. Perfect timing, I had evidence. Now Thomas couldn't escape the truth. I responded with a smile. "Oh, thank you. I wanted to get divorced too. Come to my place for the divorce discussion." "What? No, but..." "You want to divorce, right? I've prepared evidence of your affair and am waiting." Though I couldn't see him, his voice sounded strained. "Evidence of an affair? What are you talking about?" No use pretending. "I have the evidence photos." "Evidence photos?" I could almost see him getting pale. Suppressing my laughter, I continued. "Then, I'll give you the address. Let's meet next Sunday to discuss in detail. I gave him the address of a certain location and quickly ended the call. I had successfully set up the divorce confrontation. Now, if only I could make him apologize. Honestly, that would be the trickiest part. I steeled myself for the upcoming meeting. On the promised Sunday. I was already at the meeting place before the scheduled time. I wondered when he would arrive. Looking around, I spotted Thomas in the corner of my eye.
Over here!
I waved and called out. He looked up, surprised. Here? Yes. Didn't I give you the address? But, this place, whose mansion is it? Thomas looked behind me. There stood a mansion worth about $1 million. Much larger than a normal house, with a garden. A 3-story building with a basement and a theater room. Luxury cars parked in the built-in garage. Pointing at the mansion, I said with a smile. This is my house. It's newly built, so it's beautiful, right?
Your house?
Yes. I thought I'd live here after the divorce, so I started building it a while ago. Yes, the place I had called him to was my newly built house. Thomas, thinking of me as just a housewife, was understandably shocked. Pushing him from the back, I led him into the house. I guided him to the living room. Let's start our discussion. This is my lawyer. I introduced my waiting lawyer. But Thomas was too distracted. Restless, his gaze never settled. He kept looking around, not even trying to see the evidence photos of his affair on the table. Also, he didn't respond when spoken to. Frankly, the discussion was unproductive. Eventually, he asked in a quiet mutter. How did you afford this house? While thinking, is that what you're curious about? I answered. I just bought it, normally.
Liar. A housewife can't afford to buy a house.
It's said that to buy a $1 million house, one needs an income of around $150,000 per year. But I have that kind of income. So, I answered calmly. I earn that much. Do you have a problem with that?
No, but how?
I started helping out at a friend's company, and before I knew it, things turned out like this. The story goes back a few years. When I decided to divorce during my father's hospitalization turmoil, I started preparing for it. The first thing I did was look for a job. I wouldn't be able to live without a job after the divorce. So, I searched for a job to sustain myself. But good jobs aren't easy to find. That's when I consulted my close friend Linda. Why don't you help me out with my work? What kind of work do you do? Aquaculture on land. Land-based aquaculture involves artificially creating facilities like pools for farming. There are downsides, of course, but it prevents ocean pollution. It's an eco-friendly type of farming. Linda's father started it, and now Linda had taken over. So, you had been working there? Thomas asked tentatively. After I started helping, the business began to thrive. I was mainly involved in negotiations and administrative work. Linda was grateful for my help, and eventually, I was promoted to an executive position. It was all coincidental, but I believe luck is part of one's capabilities. Hearing my story, he looked dejected. Then, after a moment of thought, he suddenly looked up.
Okay. Let's pretend this divorce talk never happened. How about we start over?
As he spoke nonsense, I coldly replied. Are you crazy?
No, I genuinely want to start over with you.
Thomas pleaded fervently. But seeing that he was only dazzled by my money, I retorted with a raised eyebrow. I refuse to be with someone who cheats. And someone who neglects Joseph. No, about my father.
Enough. You don't know, but I was the one paying for Joseph's hospital bills.
The money Thomas gave me was really just a little. After paying for food, utilities, and other expenses, there was usually nothing left, sometimes not even enough. He only gave me that much. Obviously, there was no way to pay Joseph's hospital bills with it. At first, I managed somehow, but later I paid them with my salary.
And yet, you never listened to me or visited Joseph.
Well, that's because
I can't trust someone like that.
I raised my voice, and he fell silent. Then, the lawyer discussed the compensation. Thomas couldn't say anything. He just kept his head down until the end. Eventually, prompted by the lawyer, Thomas signed the divorce papers. The compensation was set at $30,000.
So, now that the divorce is settled, you'll pay Joseph's hospital bills.
Ah. Thomas nodded reluctantly. At least he didn't argue. I felt relieved. Finally, I sent him away, as if chasing him out. It's over at last. The only regret was that he never apologized. But I had one last card to play. If I played it, he would apologize. Thinking that, a smile crept onto my face. A few days later, after leaving the company, someone called out to me from behind.
Hey, Elizabeth!
Turning around, I saw Thomas standing there.
Don't address me so familiarly. We're divorced. Shut up! What did you do?
He looked at me with an angry, red face. His reaction told me everything. Ah, he must have heard that news at the company. I smiled and responded. What do you think I did?
Don't joke around. Tell me how you got me fired.
He stomped his foot. His frustration amused me, and a smile escaped.
Isn't it your own fault? Getting punished for having an affair with the office clerk?
His affair partner was a clerk at his company. Apparently, he did whatever he wanted because he was the president. After deciding to divorce, I reported the matter to Joseph. While Joseph regretted our divorce, he was furious about Thomas's actions. When I showed him the affair evidence photos, Joseph became even more angry. Then he said to me, I want to transfer all my company shares to you. To me? What about Thomas's brother?
No, to you. Use them to dethrone Thomas from his position as president.
That was Joseph's plan. His company is a corporation. For a president or any executive appointment, a shareholders' meeting resolution is necessary. Of course, it can also be decided by a board of directors resolution. However, Joseph's company isn't very large. He holds most of the issued shares. This means that as a shareholder, he could make decisions alone. But it's common for small company presidents to hold the majority of shares. If I inherited all of Joseph's shares, I could exercise the voting rights alone. Nevertheless, Thomas's dismissal wasn't my decision. I informed James about acquiring the shares. And only reported Thomas's affair. The rest was up to James' judgment.
James was considerate.
James, huh? Why would he do whatever you say?
It's not about following my orders. It's about doing what's best for the company.
As I said this, Thomas collapsed on the spot. Then, he began to mutter apologies.
I was wrong. I'm sorry, please forgive me.
I won't.
If things stay this way, I'll have no job and be left destitute.
That's not my concern. It's all his responsibility.
I won't forgive you even if you apologize. Please! Forgive me! I'm begging you!
He apologized profoundly right there. I turned my back.
Sorry, but there's nothing I can do.
Why not? If you own the shares.
I sold them to James and his wife. I don't want anything to do with you anymore.
At that moment, I heard his sobbing. Of course, I pretended not to hear and walked away. After his dismissal as president, Thomas had to leave the company. He might have stayed if he had been an employee or a working director. But Thomas was arrogant, having joined the company through Joseph's referral. I refused to be an employee. He even said that. So, when he was dismissed, he was kicked out immediately. Now he's working a part-time job at a grocery store, but re-employment at his age is difficult. He's likely to spend his old age in regret and without money. As for me, being divorced allowed me to focus more on my work. There's no talk of remarriage, but I have a few male colleagues. Spring might come again for me. I was thinking about this when Richard called. I'll bring my girlfriend over sometime.
That's great. I'm looking forward to it.
I failed in marriage, but I don't want Richard to. But I'm sure he'll be fine. Richard is much more sensible than me. My husband has a curious name, Wyatt. I had no way of knowing that my mother-in-law's fierce wishes were contained therein when I met him. I'm Ashley. Currently 44. This story dates back to when I was 32 and discovered the origin of Wyatt's name. We met in college. We're the same age. He went on to graduate school, but I got a job. Then, at 27, we felt it was time to settle down, so we got married. He was serious and very reserved. He's so earnest that instead of saying I like you or I like you a lot, he straightforwardly says I love you. That's one of the things I loved about him. However, he had one worry. When we went to his family home for a family meeting, his mother, Madison, told us,
"We won't accept marriage unless we live together."
Oh no. But we were having such quality time together. When I said this depressedly, he said,
"Then how about a runaway marriage?"
Wyatt made this astonishing proposal. He's so serious, he might just do it. No, Having been loved by my parents all my life, the thought of being estranged from them due to marriage troubled me. Well, I'll continue working, so I'll be out mostly. It should be fine. I agreed.
Are you sure? I've already received the entire inheritance, so even a runaway marriage would be fine,
he said with a straight face. His father had apparently passed away from illness when he was in high school. No, yeah, it's fine, I understand, for now at least. And so, with our marriage, living with my MIL began. Right with the cohabitation, the troubles started. Harassment towards me from day one. Isn't this supposed to start later on? We had a wedding reception at noon. We had moved our belongings the day before and started living in Wyatt's family home that day, but first, "Make dinner, please," was how it started. It's already past 6 p.m., and I'm tired from the wedding reception, but it's MIL's order, and I didn't want to start trouble on the first day. So, I'll make something from what's in the fridge, I said.
There's nothing in it.
She showed me the empty fridge. Start with the shopping, she said.
And don't talk to me every now and then. You're the last person to come into this house, which means you're the lowest here. I don't want someone at the bottom to talk to me casually. Also, find the cooking utensils and seasonings yourself, and manage somehow.
So, without even being told where the nearest supermarket was, I ended up having to whip up dinner from scratch. I managed to locate the nearest supermarket using car navigation, but searching for spices and pots took a while. Finally, dinner was ready.
Done!
I called out only for Madison. But she called Wyatt, who was upstairs, and said,
"A delicious meal is ready. Ashley's tired, so I made it." Hey, wait.
From the first day, this marked the beginning of a thorny path. Madison's harassment continued daily. Even after returning from work, cooking was my duty. Laundry, of course, was too. And she'd claim to Wyatt that she did it all.
Her constant remark was, "You're not even family to me. You come from another home, so you don't know the rules here. Look, even the way you fold this towel is wrong," she said. "Could you teach me how to fold it, then?"
When I humbly asked,
"Why should I teach someone who's not family, someone from another home?"
she'd retort. Hearing our loud exchange,
"What's going on?"
Wyatt would come down from upstairs to the washroom.
I started to say, Madison was complaining about the way I fold towels.
But,
"Wally, listen! She's complaining about the way we fold our towels."
Hanging onto Wyatt's arm, she raised a cry that sounded almost like sobbing.
Reflexively, I was surprised and let out a strange sound like what?
Such hollowness and blatant lies. Enough, this person isn't worth talking about, I'll ask Wyatt directly. I thought, shaking with anger.
Just show me how to fold the towel.
My voice laced with irritation.
Well, if you pick it up from the folded edge, it unfolds, so. I think the folded part should face this way. I never really paid attention.
He demonstrated how he folded the towel and placed it.
Make sure you follow that,
Madison shouted.
but I think you should fold it however you like. That's what I think,
Wyatt said, then added.
Let's not shout about something like this.
With that, he left. Then,
You just tried to snitch. You're not even a family member.
she confronted me with a fierce look. Snitch. I hadn't heard that word since middle school. And honestly, this kind of bullying, no offense, felt like something a middle schooler would do. I held back my anger. Madison's unfairness was clear, so naturally, I told Wyatt about it.
Got it. I'll talk to Mom,
He said while folding the newspaper he was reading.
I said, but then, she'll just say I'm snitching again. Feeling down.
Seeing this, he replied.
No, but I've realized that Mom has been a bit too harsh on you.
And just held me in his arms. One day, amidst Madison's relentless harassment, an incident occurred. A call came from the neighborhood supermarket.
Your mother tried to leave the store without paying for the items.
Is that Madison a shoplifter? I was at work, but our home phone was set to forward calls to my mobile, so I was immediately aware of the incident. Of course, Wyatt was at work too. I left work early to pick her up. There in the supermarket manager's office sat the manager and Madison.
Madison, what have you done?
It was such a shock that I burst through the door and confronted her directly. She snapped back.
You're not family, go away.
She kicked a chair in front of her and turned her face away, spitting the words out.
What?
It was her usual line, but I was speechless that she'd use it even in such a situation. I was frozen in place.
It's all recorded on the security camera,
the manager then said. I realized then that I hadn't apologized to the manager. It's not like people practice how to react when a family member is caught shoplifting, so I hope he'd forgive the oversight. Apologizing was the priority.
I'm very sorry for this,
I said. Madison, upon seeing this.
An apology from someone who's not family doesn't mean anything to me,
she scoffed. This wasn't solving anything. And her attitude. Both the manager and I were stunned into silence. She kept sulking and turning her face away. 2 hours later, Wyatt arrived. Then,
Wally. It's finally happened, because of this DIL. She's been bullying me, and the stress.
Madison suddenly burst into tears. The manager and I were speechless at her sudden change in behavior. After 2 hours of silence, this was her reaction.
I'm very sorry. We will pay double the cost of the items,
Wyatt said, bowing his head.
Shoplifting. This is unbelievable. And for 2 hours until you came, I was just being ignored. Actually,
Wyatt stroked my back soothingly.
This isn't her first time. What? Shoplifting is like a habit for her. It's happened before. And you didn't try to do something about it? Surely, as a family. Dad used to handle it before he fell ill. It stopped after he passed away, but it started again when you came.
I couldn't quite understand the logic behind it. I didn't understand, but
I can't stay silent anymore because she's accused me of you're not part of my family, go home, and you are bullying me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to fight back.
He just kept silently stroking my back. 2 months later, another supermarket called about Madison shoplifted.
Here we go.
Thumbs up for a family member's crime is inappropriate, but I was actually waiting for this. Holding a certain document, I stood up from my desk at work. The supermarket where she was caught was quite far from our house. Ascending the stairs to the waiting room where she was,
How did you even get to this store from so far away?
I heard the manager's loud voice from the door. The previous manager was slim, but this one seemed stout just from his voice. As I opened the door, indeed, there stood a large, burly man. But her response was unexpected. By taxi.
Taxi. You took a taxi all this way just to shoplift.
The manager's voice, fitting his size, boomed again.
I bet you've been banned from all the supermarkets in the neighborhood, haven't you?
It was my turn to enter. This being the second time, I first apologized to the manager. Then turned to confront Madison.
Madison, I do the shopping, don't I? You don't need to buy anything, so why go out to shoplift?
As expected, Madison spat out her usual line.
You're not family, go away.
Here it comes. I've been waiting for this line. I decided to confront her with every single fact.
Then I'll leave. And by the way, Wyatt won't come to pick you up either. At that, Madison exclaimed, "What?" surprised by the unexpected answer. I mean,
I slammed the paper I had on the desk in front of her.
You're not Wyatt's family, are you? What?
Even the manager, with his large build, was taken aback.
Do you understand this?
I smile and say to the manager next to me. Her shoulders started to tremble.
Since I was constantly being told you're not family, I thought I'd retort with I am a family member, look here, next time. So I fetched our vital records, and to my surprise, it turns out you're not the family member here.
Her shoulders trembled more violently.
Wyatt knows all about why it's come to this. He's on his way here today. He's coming, but he won't be picking you up anymore. What?
Her face began to turn pale. Beside her.
What does that mean?
The manager interjected. Being a stranger and moreover dealing with a shoplifter, he probably didn't want to get involved, but even as an outsider, this not a family member though a mother was too intriguing to ignore.
Well, you'll understand when Wyatt arrives,
I declared confidently. On the evening I fetched the vital records and learned the truth, I asked Wyatt what it all meant.
My birth mother was.
That's when he revealed the truth to me.
She passed away when I was in elementary school.
The vital records corroborated this. And the name of Wyatt's deceased mother wasn't Madison, the woman living with us now.
Why didn't you tell me?
I had to ask, genuinely puzzled.
I told you I inherited everything, right? I said that when we were talking about possibly having a runaway marriage, and I thought I had explained it then. Your words were far from enough.
Typical of the reticent Wyatt.
However,
what he shared next was quite surprising. That too was about to be laid out before our eyes. As before, Wyatt arrived 2 hours late. I'm terribly sorry for this. He first apologized to the manager. Wally. In front of the vital records, Madison started to tremble. It's not true, you see.
It is true, isn't it?
She gasped and flinched.
You know what I'm talking about.
Wyatt let out a sigh. Then he began to explain again, intending Madison to hear as well. The most pitiful was the manager, forced to listen to the burdensome family issues of others after dealing with shoplifting, but he sat quietly and listened. The content was nightmarish, but no doubt intriguing.
My birth mother passed away when I was in elementary school. As you can see from the house, we were wealthy, and we had a live-in housekeeper. That's her.
She was the housekeeper. Her true identity revealed.
She harassed my mom quite a bit. Perhaps she thought a child wouldn't understand, but I grew up witnessing it all. She constantly bullied Mom with "you're not family" and "you don't know the rules of this house because you come from another home," yet she never taught the rules. Mom was tormented by this until her death. From the first day of marriage, she was bullied relentlessly. When I was born, desperate for hope, she named me Wyatt, wishing me to be strong and brave. Wait a minute.
Madison interrupted. I
I took care of you since you were in your first year of high school because Albert, before he passed, told me to look after Wyatt. I've been caring for you dearly ever since.
Dad indeed mentioned she will be like a mother from now on before he passed. He also said my inheritance was partly as a caretaker's fee for you. The rest became mine. That's why I've been calling you Mom. But Dad knew you were bullying my real mom. I directly heard and saw him reprimanding you several times. Each time, you cried and claimed Mom was lying and belittling you. When Mom passed, Dad, already frail, regretted relying on you for the mansion and me. Before he died, he told me, avenge Samantha.
Wyatt spoke calmly. To which,
That's not true. That's not.
Madison cried out.
I raised you like a natural child.
He responded. Like a natural child. He laughed. Wyatt, usually so reserved and not very expressive. It was the first time I saw him laugh in such a cold manner. While Mom was alive, you claimed her cooking as your own. After she passed, you bought deli items, claiming you made them. I remember you washing containers. Now, you claim Ashley's cooking as your own. How can you keep lying about something as obvious as who made the food? Is lying to your natural child a part of being a mother? The person we thought was Madison hunched over, trembling. Had she not realized we knew? Wyatt continued.
When you said you wouldn't approve the marriage unless we lived with you, I seriously considered a runaway marriage. You probably thought, with Dad's small inheritance gone, you needed me as a new golden goose. From our perspective, you're a complete stranger. If the house was gone, so would you. But then Ashley agreed to live together. She was loved by her parents, and I, despite being served deli items, was grateful for your care from my first year of high school to grad school. Even if you were living off Dad's inheritance. Once married, Ashley was forced to cook and do laundry, and you claimed it was your work. You're not family. You come from another home, so you don't know our rules. You bullied her just like Mom, without teaching the house rules. Seeing this, I decided to corner you thoroughly. Dad's will stated she will be like a mother from now on and avenge Samantha. I found a way to fulfill these seemingly contradictory requests. From my first year of high school to grad school, 9 years. I've supported you financially, even lived with you after marriage, but today marks the end of those 9 years. Regardless of the circumstances, today ends my gratitude for you acting as a mother. And as for avenging, that starts today. From today, I'll no longer recognize you as family. Naturally, as a stranger, you'll also need to leave the house.
Wait, just wait a minute, really.
Dad never married you because of all this.
Wyatt stated firmly. A moment of silence followed. Wyatt must have been carrying various burdens since Samantha's passing. Today, everything was about to change. But I couldn't let the pressure of this change defeat us, so I gave his back a firm pat.
Hey.
He turned around.
Samantha might have been tormented by this person,
I said, pointing again at the vital records.
But I won't fall ill. I won't be brought down by this. And I'll make you happy, compensating for the loss of Samantha. Just leave it to me.
Wyatt cracked a gentle smile. The kind I hadn't seen before. So, Madison, or rather the stranger she truly was, ended up taken away by the police, as no one would take her in. It seems she was detained for a while. Later, she did come back, begging to be let in, but Wyatt resolutely refused to open the door. Being a habitual shoplifter, with no nearby supermarkets left to use, Madison moved far away. We received a message from her about her move and sent her belongings, postage due, to a very distant place, 3 states away. Years passed since then. We now have 2 children, and our life is serene. The reason I'm recounting this story now is that yesterday Wyatt suddenly started speaking out of nowhere.
By the way, he said.
There was another reason behind my name,
He prefaced,
it's probably not a big deal.
then started his story.
The year I was born, John Wayne passed away. Dad, a fan of westerns, wanted to name me John, but Mom, who had her quirks, didn't want to settle for just John. Instead, she thought of a western hero. Wyatt Earp!
I burst out laughing.
That must have been the main reason for the name.
I just love this natural side of Wyatt. A quiet man doesn't have to be boring. With Wyatt and our children, our life ahead holds no tears. Only smiles for tomorrow.